Well, victims of crime this week were vindicated as Ghislaine Maxwell and R. Kelly received prison sentences totaling 50 years.
A jury of Mr. Kelly's peers confirmed what these courageous victims have known for a very long time. Mr. Kelly is not an honest person. This man is a prolific serial predator who utilized his status as a Grammy Award-winning household name with global recognition to inflict pain and anguish on so many victims.
And while all that was happening, an Illinois mother mourned the murder of her 3 children at the hands of her estranged husband. And this week I'm going to look back at a murdered police hero who shared his own prophetic prediction of his on-duty murder. It's time for this week's Crime Recap. Hello everybody and welcome to Profiling Evil and this week's Crime Recap. Hey folks, if you're new to our channel, thanks for stopping by and please take a moment and hit that like and subscribe button. Make sure you're ringing the bell and all of that stuff so you get our notifications. If you're one of our longtime members, thanks so much for your support. I was out of the country this week and I created some of this video from my hotel room and I've mixed it with some of the stuff here at home, hopefully getting my backgrounds matching. But I want to start out, before I talk about R. Kelly and Ghislaine Maxwell, by talking about Petitos and the Laundries and their court case ruling. You see, a Florida judge ruled that the Petito family lawsuit against Brian Laundrie's family can go forward. He went as far as saying that the Laundries' actions, if true, are, quote, callous and cruel. The Petitos thanked the judge through social media outlets, and they said that they wouldn't be making any other comments at this time. No word has come out from the Laundries, but here's what this civil case boils down to. The Laundrie family attorney argued they have a right to remain silent, and that protects them from lawsuits. Now, the judge had a much different view, stating that the Laundries didn't remain silent. In fact, they said that the Laundrie family made a statement before Gabby's body was found, stating, quote, if the facts of this case were truly about the silence, with no affirmative action by the Laundries, the court would have resolved the case in the Laundrie favor on the concept of the lack of legal duty for the Laundries to act, close quote. Well, the judge continued. He said, quote, had the Laundries truly stayed silent, the court would have granted the motion to dismiss in the Laundrie's favor, but they did not stay silent, close quote. Now, this statement references a statement made by Laundrie's attorney released back on September 14th, days before Gabby was recovered. The statement read, quote, it is our understanding that a search has been organized for Miss Petito in or near Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. On behalf of the Laundrie family, it is our hope that the search for Miss Petito is successful and that Miss Petito is reunited with her family, close quote. Well, the judge also said that if the Petitos are correct in their complaint and the Laundries knew that Gabby was dead when they issued that statement, that the statement, quote, was particularly callous and cruel and insufficiently outrageous to state claims for intentional infliction of emotional distress, close quote. Now, I think this case is going to get a whole lot more interesting and it's going to garner a lot more attention as it moves forward into trial. Profiling Evil is going to be tracking it, and I hope you do too. And in breaking news, we talked about it. I think we were the first social media YouTuber to talk about it. Caitlyn Armstrong, the woman who Austin police have a murder arrest warrant for, has been arrested in Costa Rica. Now, according to news releases, the woman's been hiding out at a beachfront hostel. But now she's sitting in a foreign jail awaiting extradition back to the United States. Like you, I'm going to be really interested in what she has to say about the influence her love triangle boyfriend played in all of this. I mean, the question for you is, do you think he knew what was going to happen? Or did his little secret rendezvous with Wilson lead to her murder? Now, I want to reach out and talk a little bit about R&B superstar R. Kelly, who was sentenced to 30 years in prison this week for using his superstardom to subject young fans, including children, to repeated sexual abuse. This week, some of Kelly's survivors testified in the sentencing hearing, including one who said, quote, "You made me do things that broke my spirit. I literally wished I would die because of how you made me feel," close quote. Some of those victims and several who attended the sentencing remained terrorized by this man and would only enter the courtroom wearing face coverings. Kelly was also convicted for running a criminal enterprise. I mean, it was a brilliant charge by prosecutors who used the racketeering statutes to define this case. Listen as I talk with Julie Grant on Court TV about the case and the charges and the ongoing victimization of those injured as the sentence is being handed down.
Let me bring in my guest to talk a little bit about the head of the criminal enterprise, so to speak, R. Kelly. We know he's been convicted of that racketeering case. We have on the show Commander Mike King. He is a retired police commander. He's joining us from France today. Wow, he travels all over after retirement from his many years of law enforcement. He does the podcast Profiling Evil. And Commander, always a pleasure to see you. We heard R. Kelly's counsel saying there was no enterprise here. There's no enterprise. We're going to take an appeal. I've said all along, I thought these federal prosecutors were brilliant and using the racketeering charge and saying, oh, yes, he was the head of this organization. He had all these people working on his payroll, and they were procuring these boys, girls, women for R. Kelly's sick sexual gratification. And tell me what you think about that. I'm sure as somebody in law enforcement, you're going to look at things, from a charging perspective all the time. Your thoughts on the enterprise and the head of it?
I had the opportunity on many occasions to look at local statutes and state statutes. Periodically, when I was cross-designated as a U.S. Marshal, I was able to look at a lot of federal statutes. But I love the fact that they're looking at these and incorporating these statutes into play. This is the perfect kind of case. And I guess the thing I keep looking at in this case, Julie, is why on earth are people having to come in with their faces covered? Why are witnesses terrified to testify? It's not just a matter of people of influence terrorizing people and causing them to be fearful to testify and talk about what happened to them, but it's people with influence, regardless of whether they're rich, influential. Somehow they have power over victims, and those victims can't come forward. And this is a great day for victims to have that kind of acclamation and be told that yes, we believe you.
It sure is, Commander. You're absolutely right. It is a great day for victims today and really this week.
Well, this now sentenced predator's been in jail since 2019 after bail was denied. His lawyers argued to the court that he shouldn't receive more than 10 years in prison because he, quote, experienced a traumatic childhood, close quote. His lawyer continued to paint this picture of how badly Kelly had it in his life. All those millions of dollars, I guess. But he, in fact, was talking about his childhood, arguing that he had a tough life, but he was also troubled in his adult life, saying, quote, he repeatedly was defrauded and financially abused, often by the people he paid to protect him, close quote. This reminds me of those discussions we've had on Profiling Evil about nurture versus nature in the Academy sessions. I hope you'll go back and listen to those videos. And while you're at it, hey folks, consider joining our channel memberships. I mean, the financial support really does help us. So the question is, did R. Kelly commit all these crimes because he didn't get warm cookies and milk as a child? Well, this wasn't Kelly's first brush with sexual abuse allegations. According to media reports, he was also sued by a woman who alleged sexual battery and sexual harassment while she was a minor. And he later faced criminal child pornography charges related to a different child in Chicago. He was acquitted on the pornography case and reportedly settled the lawsuit on the other case. And all the while, he continued to sell millions of albums. Well, all of that changed when a Brooklyn federal court jury convicted Kelly after testimony about how his entourage of managers and aides kept girls obedient and available for his predatory desires. Prosecutors would write that the artist used his, quote, fame, money, and popularity to systematically prey upon children and young women for his own sexual gratification, close quote. The details of the abuse, frankly, were so intense that I chose not to talk about them on the program. But you can go back and study it if you want to learn more about it. Bottom line is, this was a predator. And this is a case that required examination of victim memories, some of those memories from many years previously. These are tricky kinds of cases, and Julie Grant and I discussed it further on Court TV this week. Let's watch this little segment.
To continue along the theme of, predatory conduct, let's show a clip where Gloria Allred's talking about how R. Kelly is now using the same attorney that Bill Cosby used.
His new defense attorney was also the defense attorney in the trial that I and my firm just completed last week against Bill Cosby, which we won, despite his vigorous attempts by his defense team to present a defense for Mr. Cosby. We were able to bring him to justice in our civil lawsuit against him. We won. And now I will see that same defense attorney this morning defending R. Kelly, who was clearly a sexual predator.
Yeah, Bill Cosby is another one recently held liable for predatory conduct. The woman who sued him civilly that Gloria Allred represented claimed that she was at the Playboy Mansion as a teenager. If my memory serves me correctly, I believe she was 15 at the time that she was forced by him to perform a sexual act on him at such a young age. And then because of the laws in California, Commander, aren't these laws great that essentially what the law says, I'm paraphrasing here, if you were victimized as a child and then you're suppressing those memories that stay with you, but as an adult, you can still recall what happened to you. The law changed a few years back that allows for, essentially the statute of limitations to be greatly expanded so that adults who carry with them those awful traumas that they experience at the hands of a predator, they can then get justice as an adult. And here, that happened in civil court because we know it was quite sad what happened in terms of the legality and the technicality that Bill Cosby's conviction was overturned in Pennsylvania, not for a lack of evidence. Commander, tell me, when you see the ability for a law to work like that for a victim like somebody Gloria Allred represented there in California against Bill Cosby, that's got to be pretty gratifying, right, as a police officer?
Yes, and I think, holy cow, what a responsibility that's placed on not only the investigator, but Julie, when you were sitting in the prosecutor's seat, if you're going to go forward with this, whether it's a criminal or a civil action, that you really do have a case put together. And it's difficult when it's relying only on those memories. I mean, I worked through and lived through the 90s when we had the satanic panic and all the regressed memories that were coming back, and the challenges against, were they being introduced because of therapy, or were they really memories? And so it is so important that we just don't rely on a single form of evidence when we listen to these horrendous stories, but that we have other pieces of evidence, which in some of these cases, and probably many of these kinds of cases we're talking about, they are really difficult, but need something to help back them up.
Exactly, Commander. We got to help victims and survivors, because when you're thinking about their children who are being victimized in these kinds of cases we're talking about, and for a child, to be able to speak about that, that is really, really tough, and it's just common that that's going to be suppressed, and then if somebody feels able and empowered and comfortable enough to speak out, then the resources will be there for them. Commander King, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, in his comments to Kelly, the judge remarked, quote, "Although sex was certainly a weapon that you used, this is not a case about sex. It's a case about violence, cruelty, and control," close quote. The judge gave it to Kelly, both barrels. Kelly sat motionless throughout the testimony, many times with his hands folded and just looking down at the ground. But the judge did speak clearly when he sentenced Kelly to 30 years in prison, including adding on a $100,000 fine. It'll be interesting to see if there are any civil suits that follow on this one.
We have on the program a guest who knows all about the importance of child interviews and child advocacy. Commander Mike King is on the show. He also hosts the Profiling Evil podcast. He's joining us from France. And a little known fact about you, Commander, apparently you helped establish the second child advocacy center in the United States.
That's right. Yes,
Wow.
It was quite an experience.
Okay, so why the need? What was the need that you saw going back, like 31 years ago, if I'm not mistaken? Why the need for people like this witness we see on the stand to know how to deal with kids?
You have such a good memory, Julie. Yeah, this thing goes back into the early 90s. We recognized that the courts were putting children in terrible positions as they went through the process in the courtroom. And that's why we saw things change from the preliminary hearings and the amount of aggression that sometimes existed there to hearings themselves. But we realized along the way that we were bringing children into these dark, dusty police departments, hallways with smoke in them, and a murderer in the chair next to him being interviewed. And we were trying to interview these children about these horrific events that happened to them. And we realized this was completely out of line. It was intimidating for the child. And so we started looking into what one center had already been created, these children advocacy centers. We called them in Utah Children's Justice Centers, but a place where children can be brought and forensically examined, just like this investigative analyst that's talking from the Bureau right now, and they can be interviewed by an expert, not a cop who maybe is going to be a little rough around the edges. It was all about the child, and it was so important that we took care of them first.
Wow. Well, thank you for doing that. And thankfully, many other jurisdictions have followed suit in what you did. It's quite remarkable and certainly very important. And
R. Kelly wasn't the only big name in the news this week, as another judge in New York, just across the river, sentenced socialite Ghislaine Maxwell. You remember her, the co-conspirator of Jeffrey Epstein. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison for sexually exploiting underage girls. That courtroom and the overflow seating, I might add, was completely packed as onlookers and journalists fought for a seat to witness firsthand the sentencing. As the judge handed down the sentence, she said, quote, "The damage done to these young girls was incalculable," close quote. While slamming Maxwell with 20 years in prison, and by the way, it was at least 10 years shorter than the prosecution's recommended prison sentence, this means that Maxwell will be in her 70s before she's released. That is, unless the conviction's overturned, which we already heard in that R. Kelly case we were talking about, that they're going to go right to town on trying to get that overturned. Well, like R. Kelly's case, Maxwell's defense team spent much of their time in court trying to discredit the victims. But the jury didn't go for it. They believed the victims of the crime. And in a real surprising twist, we finally got to hear from Ghislaine Maxwell when she stood and addressed the court. Now picture this. She's wearing jail-issued clothing. Maxwell acknowledges the pain and anguish that the children she victimized suffered, but she stops short of apologizing to the victim, and she certainly didn't accept responsibility for the crimes that she was convicted of. Nope. Instead, she made this all about her. She said, quote, "It's the greatest regret of my life that I ever met Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein should have been here before all of you," close quote. Well, Miss Maxwell, Epstein wasn't there. This guy cowardly committed suicide while awaiting trial, leaving you, Maxwell, to face the music alone. I found myself wondering if Maxwell might actually end up sharing the secret 8, those names of other perpetrators that we've heard about, now that she has nothing to gain by remaining silent. Now, there are lots of theories out there about her making her way to the UK and walking out a door, but I don't know what'll happen there. I suspect there are a lot of really uncomfortable people out there right now. Julie Grant and I talked about her sentencing and this vindication felt by her victims on Court TV. Let's watch this segment.
With the sentencing of Ghislaine Maxwell on Tuesday, so many people got justice with that punishment being doled out from the court. 20 years for anybody at home who might have missed that yesterday. That's what she's going to do. Let's play a clip now.
If I could, Julie,
sure, Commander, go ahead.
I mean, on Ghislaine, I mean, I think it's such an amazing case to talk about how someone who, some have argued that maybe she was groomed by Epstein years and years in advance, but she became a predator and she made those decisions outright. She made them understanding what the impact was, even as a victim, understanding what the emotional and physical and just the traumatic impact that comes from being victimized, and became a groomer who was training others to be groomers. I mean, this was no small case in her situation, and to see that sentence handed down, I thought was also a real good day for people who are victimized.
Sure was, Commander King. Thank you for that.
At the end of the sentencing hearing, there were 3 distinct comments worth sharing. The first comes from Allison Moe, a federal prosecutor who described Maxwell's view of what she classified as 2 classes of people. Quote, the people who really mattered and the people who were disposable. Close quote. I also found Maxwell's lawyer's comments interesting when she, speaking of Maxwell, said Maxwell's been, quote, vilified, pilloried, tried and convicted in the court of public opinion, close quote. Well, isn't that exactly what's happened for the last couple of years by the defense teams as they've talked about the way in which law enforcement is going after this woman, or the prosecution for going after her and charging her with these crimes? That's where we are today, folks, is things are socially presented. But the comment that was most captivating to me, it came from U.S. Attorney Damian Williams. Now, he said, quote, this sentence, speaking of Maxwell's, this sentence sends a strong message that no one is above the law, and it is never too late for justice, close quote. I hope Williams' words serve as a warning to other predators that they can't stop looking over their shoulders. The cops are coming for them. I'd like to invite you to go back and watch some of my videos on Ghislaine Maxwell, the grooming tactics and other things that we talked about in there, including, make sure you catch my interview with Kirby Summers, the author of the Ghislaine Maxwell, an unauthorized biography. You can find those links down below, or just go to Profiling Evil's playlist and look them up. As we start to wind down, I want to know if you caught the story of the 35-year-old Illinois father of 3 who left his estranged wife a note saying, quote, if I can't have them, neither can you, close quote. He allegedly scribbled the declaration at the time he was drowning 5-year-old Bryant, 3-year-old Cassidy, and 2-year-old Gideon Carrolls. The children were found dead at the father's home in a Chicago suburb, and the murders were discovered when the children's mom couldn't reach her soon-to-be ex-husband to pick up the kids from a scheduled visit. Carrolls apparently made several failed suicide attempts in the home after the kids died. This was evident by blood evidence found throughout the home. Now, this guy was nowhere to be seen, and his vehicle was missing, which prompted a statewide attempt to locate. Let's listen as the local police chief describes what his officers encountered when they entered the home.
Round Lake Beach police were called to a home in the 200 block of Camden Lane for a well-being check at 1:40 p.m. Monday by a mother who was supposed to pick up her children from her estranged husband. Upon arrival, the 3 children, ages 5, 3, and 2, were discovered deceased in the home. So, as I mentioned in the press release, the kids were actually visiting with him at the time, and the mother was coming to pick them up to take them to a doctor's visit. So he had custody of them at that time.
Do we have names for the children?
The specifics of their custody arrangement, that I do not have for you at this moment.
Do we know anything about their marriage, how long they were married?
My briefing is that we are all touched by this. This is not something that you go to.
Carol's vehicle was spotted sometime later, and a high-speed chase ensued. When the police attempted to pull this guy over, he hit the gas and took off. Well, the chase ended in a crash, and police reported that as they pulled Carol's from the car, that he indicated that he had drowned his children in a tub, one by one. He was taken to the hospital for a quick checkup and then booked into the county jail. Since his arrest, media reports have suggested there was domestic violence in the home, and Carol's wife was seeking divorce after allegedly suffering abuse herself. There was also a report out there about a relative who said that Carol's suffered from mental illness, but he refused efforts to get any psychiatric help. Well, I'm telling you what, folks, watch this one closely, because I guarantee his mental health and competency is going to play heavily into his upcoming defense. He's got to have a defense, though, because he's facing first-degree murder charges. Currently, he's sitting in a Lake County jail on a $10 million bond, and we'll hear from him at his next appearance on July 13th. As we wrap up the week, I want to end with a discussion and frankly, a tribute paid toward Lieutenant Stephen Paul Williams of the Moody Police Department in Alabama. Lieutenant Williams was shot and killed while responding to a call for service at a local motel. He was killed by 2 suspects who were later arrested. This guy was a server, 23 years in law enforcement at the time he was killed. He was also a U.S. Air Force veteran. Video captured the shooting by the suspects, who fired on Williams and a young police officer that he was training. They shot 4 weapons at these officers: a .38 caliber revolver, an AK-47 semi-automatic rifle, a 9mm semi-automatic pistol, and a .40 caliber Desert Eagle pistol. In all, the suspects fired 43 rounds in the short gun battle. Again, this case highlights how dangerous policing is. I am so grateful there are people willing to go out there and do this job. Lieutenant Williams penned these words which were read at his funeral, and they embody what every police officer faces and knows. They know their sacrifice could mean the sacrifice of life. Let's listen as a family member reads his words at his funeral.
But the concept of the video was, had he ever been killed in the line of duty, that these are the words that he would have wanted you to hear. And I have his words in front of me today, and I'm going to do my very best to read them to you. It's called Don't Cry for Me by Stephen Williams, written May 6th of 2015. Don't cry for me for the life that I lost. Smile for me for the life that I lived. Don't cry for me because I'm gone, but smile for me because I was here. Don't cry for me because I was taken too young, but smile for me because my life was full and my heart was full with love for each of you. Don't cry for me because I won't see any more Sunday family gatherings, but smile for me because now I have wings. Don't cry for me because you won't see me anymore, but smile for me because I am free of the pain and misery of this world. Don't cry for me thinking of the dreams that we had that won't come true, or the plans we had that we won't start or finish, but smile for the good times we had, the laughs that we shared, and the love I had for all of you. Please don't cry for me. I lived and loved on principles such as truth, honor, and courage. Don't cry for me because I knew the sacrifice I might have to make, and I accepted that risk anyway. Don't cry for me. I was proud to be a part of something special and something amazing, and I am confident that I made a difference in the lives of those who needed me. Don't cry for me because I had the most incredible life and the most incredible family. My brothers and sisters in blue, I love you all. Smile for me, for I am in a new place, and it is beautiful, where there is no hurting, no crying, and no suffering. I am welcome here, and I finally get to rest. You see, I am no longer on watch, but know that I am watching over you. And I'll be smiling because I love you still and was blessed to be loved by each of you. And please always remember, when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul.
Well, thanks for listening, folks. I hope you'll take a moment and enter your thoughts on this week's crime recap down below. I'm going to be watching for your comments, and I hope you'll take time to read each other's and respond to each other. Thanks for your support of Profiling Evil. I hope you'll take time to visit our website at profilingevil.com. And while you're there, register for the B.O.L.O, our free digital newsletter. And take a moment, check out our story maps. And by all means, would you please consider picking up 2 of my books that are shown on Profiling Evil? One is Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult. It's about an investigation I did into a cult some time ago. We ended up putting 12 people in prison. The other book is a murder investigation from 1891. It happens to be my great-great-grandmother who was shot and killed at a town celebration. 130 years later, I solved her murder, and I think you'll enjoy reading how it all came about. Well, listen, hit that like and subscribe button, please. Consider joining our channel memberships, and think about that academy level. It's my favorite, but we really do appreciate the financial support. And we'll see you all soon at the next crime scene.